Hello, welcome to the Bitcoin Standard podcast. Our guest today is Andy Schoonover. Andy is the CEO and founder of Crowdhealth, an alternative to health insurance, which is a great idea that I have enjoyed. And we've hosted Andy before and we've discussed it. And I think it's a great way to get around some of the many failures of the modern healthcare system. He joins us today to discuss how this company's been doing. Today is their 4th birthday. They've been around for 4 years. They've been doing really well. They use Bitcoin, and they are very much Bitcoiners in their approach to this. And it's been working out very well. So, Andy, thank you so much for joining us.
Always an honor, Saif. Appreciate it.
Thanks, man. So, happy 4th birthday.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a wild ride. We started back in April of 21. And anytime you start a new business, you've got this kind of forecast of what you expect. And thank God it's gone actually much better than I had expected. So it's been a lot of fun. I've gotten to engage with lots of Bitcoiners to help develop our strategy. And so here's to another 4 years.
And 40. Why not? 4 is too little. We've got to think long term. 400 even.
There you go.
All right. So for people who are not familiar, can you just give us a brief overview of what it is that you guys do and what the model is?
Yeah, I'll start quick with just a quick background. This is my second healthcare company. And after the first one, given that most of us in the United States get our health insurance through our employer, I sold that one. So I didn't have health insurance. And so ignorantly, I thought my only option was to go to one of these Affordable Care Act plans, the Obamacare plans. And, so I went and did that, and it was, I think, $1,100 or $1,200 for me, my wife, and my 2 girls. And I kind of joke, it worked until I had to use it. My little one, who was 1 at the time, was having recurring ear infections. And so we went to the pediatrician, who said she's got a hole in her eardrum. So the fluid in her ears were getting so bad that it actually popped her eardrum. And so we needed to get little plastic tubes in her ear so that fluid could drain out so she wouldn't have a problem. So went to the ear, nose, and throat doctor, got that done in network, did everything right, got the bill, and it was $8,000. I was just like, holy crap, $8,000 for 15 minutes. But I, assumed that's what health insurance is for. Like, that's the whole point of having health insurance. And little did I know I was going to get a note a few weeks later from my health insurance company who said it was medically unnecessary. And so they declined to pay for the bill. And after 2 rounds of appeals, I think my ear, nose, and throat doctor was fighting with like an ophthalmologist or something at the health plan who knows nothing about ears. And they were like, yeah, we're not paying for it. So I had to stroke an $8,000 check to get this procedure paid for. And it was at that point where I knew that health insurance was broken. So I called my health insurance plan. I was like, I'm done. If you're not going to pay my bills, I'm not going to pay your bills. And I became uninsured. And, my wife looked at me and was like, so we're uninsured. What do we do now? A little bit nervous, obviously. And then over the next 12 to 18 months, I figured out how we could operate outside of the legacy health insurance space to pay for bills ourselves, to take true sovereignty over our own healthcare. And I realized that we could negotiate bills much lower if we were to pay them directly without all the, rent-seeking middlemen that are in healthcare currently. And I finally kind of decided, like, I bet you other people would be interested in something like this too. And so I started Crowdhealth. We've been at this for 4 years. And in essence, what we're trying to do is decentralize the decision-making processes of healthcare. So we've got currently 10,000 people, you included, who are members of our community. And about 20% of those are Bitcoiners. So we got a couple thousand Bitcoiners who are part of that. And in essence, what we do is we help each other with our healthcare bills. So, if my daughter breaks her arm and it's $5,000, we'll send a request to 100 people or 50 people in the community for $100. If they say yes, then they'll transfer $100 from my account or their account to my account. At the end of the day, I have $5,000, which I can then go and pay the doctor directly. And the benefits of this is now there's no insurance company or employer or government in between me and my doctor because I'm paying him or her directly. As a result of that, they don't have all that bureaucracy and that administration, so they can give me a much better price. So the average is about 30 to 40% of your revenue as a doctor is used to actually get paid. They spend 2 days a week fighting with health insurance plans to get paid. And so if I can give that time back to them, they can give me a much reduced price. And so that's in essence what we're doing is getting rid of all the rent-seeking middlemen and going directly to the doctor, which reestablishes that doctor-patient relationship. And now the decisions on what care I get is between me and my doctor without anybody else having any input into that decision-making process. So it's a beautiful thing. And we're slowly but surely introducing Bitcoin into that equation in hopes of ultimately getting to Bitcoin circularity within healthcare. So that's our ultimate goal, our ultimate vision for the company.
Yeah, and I think it's such a wonderful idea because even before I'd heard about this, I'd always heard of just how ridiculous the insurance industry is in the U.S. It's, it's got its problems abroad, but I think in the U.S. it's a whole other level of dysfunction. And I've heard this story from so many people that you can actually end up getting a lower price if you just pay cash than what you would pay as a deductible when you're covered from insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds crazy because you pay an exorbitant sum of money every month to be insured, and then all that does for you is that it 5x's or 10x's your bill when you go to the hospital, because now you're insured, and so now the hospital is having to deal with the insurance company, and now all the incentives are for them to jack up the price. Whereas if you just go to them directly and tell them, hey, I'd like to just pay in cash, they'll be so happy to take it that they'll offer you a better price than what the insurance company is going to force you to pay.
Yeah. It's interesting to me that me as an individual, I can actually negotiate a better price with my doctor or the hospital or whoever it may be than United Healthcare, which is the 7th largest company on the planet in terms of revenue. I think they have $425 billion of revenue every year, which is about half of what the military industrial complex, costs the United States. So one company is about half of what our military budget is. That says a lot about the company and our military budget, I think. But yeah, I mean, you have more power to negotiate than United Healthcare, which is a pretty amazing thing from my perspective. It kind of defies economics a little bit. You think more purchasing power, a lot more strength in negotiation. But what we have is a principal agent problem where our agent is actually, who's supposed to go out there and try to find us the best deals, actually is incentivized to see prices go up over time. And so, if which totally destroys against that principal agent relationship. And people don't understand that. But in the United States, health insurance plans are capped out at the amount of profit that they can have. So if I've got $1,000 of premiums, they're capped out at $150. So everybody thinks that's like, from the outside looking in, that's great. Health insurance companies shouldn't fleece us. But the problem with that is that now health insurance companies, how do they grow their revenue or their profit 10% from $150 to $165? Well, your premium, what you pay them every month, has to go up from $1,000 to $1,100. So the buyers of healthcare, these big health insurance plans, and the sellers, they want the price to go up. The sellers of healthcare, these big hospital systems, they want the price to go up. And so, you don't need to be, Saifedean to understand that if the buyer and the seller of something wants the price to go up, guess what? The price is going up. And so that's why we have, egregious prices within the United States, is because you got the buyer and the seller of the service both wanting the price to go up.
Yeah, and I think a lot more doctors are beginning to discover this and realizing that they can just opt out of the entire system and deal with the patients directly, and it works out better for the doctors and the patients. So we've had Dr. Mary Bowden on, and she's pretty amazing. I mean, she's done incredible work on COVID and curing people and getting people access to ivermectin. And she runs her clinic now just on this model where she doesn't deal with any of that stuff, as far as I could tell. And it's worked out much better for her. And I've also heard about the Oklahoma Surgery Center, who have been doing this for years. And it was truly mind-blowing when I first heard about them, because you go onto their website and you find the procedure that you want. Let's say you want a hip replacement, or you want a appendectomy or whatever, and they'll have it listed and they'll have the exact price for you of how much you're going to be paying. It's amazing. It's like you're actually just buying a service and then you pay for it. And it sounds weird for most people to think of it this way because we don't think of healthcare as if it is an economic good. It has this special romantic feeling where no, it can't just have a price on it. You can't just say $12,000 for a hip replacement. It's supposed to be about health. It's supposed to not have a bill, and so trying to not let it have a bill ends up giving us all kinds of exorbitant bills where, you're not getting the bill up front telling you you're paying $12,000. You're being told, oh, don't worry, you've got insurance, you've got coverage. But then after you go and get the procedure done, then the bills keep coming in. And then you have to play the roulette game of will they pay or won't they pay? And how are we going to convince them to pay? And what excuses are they going to use to not pay?
Yeah, exactly. And everything else in life, we know exactly what the price is, except healthcare. And
It's
so
amazing.
there is, and in many ways, we are, as individuals, through health insurance, not incentivized at all to look for the price. If my deductible is $2,000 and I need a knee replacement that's $20,000, I could care less what the price is because all the excess price is being paid by somebody else as opposed to us, right? And so, there's just no market forces within healthcare that have that drive prices down. In essence, all the market forces are pushing prices up, and so that's the challenge that we have in healthcare is nobody's incentivized to really care, even if we had the prices. I'm doing an op-ed in a fairly well known publication about how price transparency sounds great, but if people don't care what the prices are, then price transparency is pretty useless. So we have a totally screwed up system here, and it's a lot of these issues that we're talking about is what we're trying to solve here at Crowdhealth. And like I said, our members are getting half the price of what United Healthcare pays. So if you actually go out and shop for services, and that sounds so foreign to people, but if you shop for services, you can find services that are significantly better than what your health insurance plan pays. And my one example that I just gave you, $8,000 for these ear tubes, I had people reach out to me on X and say, oh yeah, we do these in our office for like $1,500 to $2,000 all day long if people pay us in cash. So I could have saved 75% if I had just known that there are other options out there, but I'm so limited by the network in which the health insurance plan requires me to go to that I don't even have the option to go to anybody else because I don't get credit for that, and the insurance plan won't pay for that. So these rules that have been put in place around these networks are actually inflating prices when they were supposed to reduce prices by using the power of the negotiation to get these doctors to reduce their prices. It just doesn't happen that way. In theory, it sounds great. And practically, it doesn't work at all.
The Bitcoin Standard podcast is brought to you by thesafehouse.com, my independent publisher and bookshop, selling the best Bitcoin books in high-quality cloth hardcovers built to last for generations. Most books these days are pretty fiat. They're flimsy and they fall apart quickly, and I did not want that for my books, so I set up the Safe House especially to provide you with beautiful, long-lasting classic cloth hardcovers you can proudly pass down for generations. You can get copies of my 3 books, The Bitcoin Standard, The Fiat Standard, and Principles of Economics, and you can also get copies of Lynn Alden's Broken Money, Parker Lewis's Gradually Then Suddenly, and Matthew Lysiak's Fiat Food, to which I contributed a few chapters. We now offer bulk discounts so you can buy books for yourself and for the friends and family you'd like to learn about Bitcoin. Buy any 2 books for $50, any 5 books or more for $20 per book, and for more than 50 books, it's only $15 per book. Go to thesafehouse.com, the SAIF house.com, where you can get all of these books in high-quality cloth hardcovers, delivered worldwide, and get 10% off for paying with Bitcoin. The Bitcoin Standard podcast is brought to you by the Daylight Computer. I love to work early in the morning and late at night, or in the sun outdoors, but regular computer screens are terrible at these times, and they strain your eyes. For years, I've wanted a paper-like electronic screen on a simple computer I could use to write. I tried several models, but none were very good. Now, finally, Daylight have delivered a fantastic full function tablet with a paper like screen that's easy on your eyes and great for outdoor use. I've been using the Daylight computer to write my next book, and it is absolutely fantastic. And it has led me to invest in this company myself. Check out my interview with Anjan Kata in episode 249. Now, tell us about why you guys are using Bitcoin and how you're using Bitcoin and how that's been going.
Yeah, I had a really interesting meeting soon after I started Crowdhealth with Jimmy Song. I know you know Jimmy well. Most of the people here listening are talking about Jimmy. I was telling him what I was doing, and he's like, "Man, the problem with health insurance is that they have this huge pool of fiat sitting in the background that they have to pay for these big bills. But unfortunately, this big pool of fiat, as we all know, is melting with inflation. And therefore, it needs to be replaced every year. And therefore, it drives costs up. So, what if you could just allow people to hold their dollars in Bitcoin as opposed to having this big pool of fiat on the back end? And it got me thinking about how do we incorporate Bitcoin more into what we do. In essence, my end goal here, and there's a couple stages to get there, but my end goal is for total Bitcoin circularity within healthcare. So instead of me sending the community $500 or $5,000 in the previous example, and then send me dollars, why not them send me Bitcoin, which I can then go and pay the hospital system in Bitcoin or the doctor in Bitcoin, so that there's a true Bitcoin circularity within healthcare. And my theory here is, healthcare within the United States is a $5 trillion industry. If it was a country, that would be the fourth largest country after the United States, China, and Japan. And so if we can get Bitcoin circularity working within healthcare in the United States, I think that will go a long way of getting, Bitcoin circularity and other kind of facets of life. And healthcare expenses are typically Americans, number one or number two, line item in their budget of, just getting their healthcare paid for. So that's our ultimate vision. We've got to get scale to get there. So if people are listening to this and are interested in an alternative to healthcare, we'd love to have you, because we need 5 or 10,000 people that want to use Bitcoin to actually have the scale to go and do this. We are building a group of doctors who are accepting Bitcoin. We are orange pilling doctors so that they will accept Bitcoin. I just talked to one of the largest hospital systems in the country who is now evaluating taking Bitcoin as a payment method as opposed to dollars. And that's a pretty big thing, because hospitals are very slow movers in terms of innovation. And so if we can create that Bitcoin circularity within healthcare, I think that just goes a long, long way. But like I said, there's a couple steps to get there. Right now, what we enable people to do is, one component of our system is that we ask you to help fund another person in the community directly every month. And we ask for an individual up to $140 to fund that individual. Right now, so for example, in April, we only asked for 80 of that $140. So if you are a Bitcoiner, we can actually take that excess 60 that will go directly to your Fold app, convert it to Bitcoin. So in essence, what you have is almost like a little Bitcoin HSA. So instead of it sitting in a big pool of fiat like health insurance, you hold it in your own account. It's increasing with value as opposed to melting away. And so that's step one of enabling our members to utilize Bitcoin for their healthcare in a more effective manner. Step two, hopefully, will be this Bitcoin circularity that I've been talking about, but we need some scale to be able to do that.
Yeah, but on the step one, I think things have been working out really well. So you said you started off in April. So, by the time most people started contributing, putting money in that was going into Bitcoin, that was probably by early 2022, when there was a pretty significant bear market. So I presume most of your clients got in a lot of their Bitcoin in the doldrums of 2022 bear market. And so
the timing was good.
Yeah, the timing was good, because now it's up 4 or 5x. So if you had kept that in dollars, or if you'd put it in an investment portfolio, it would have made a lot less in terms of appreciation. So now everybody's a lot better off, right? Because they've used Bitcoin, the magic superpower of number go up technology.
Exactly. And I still think the timing is good. So, for those who are like, I'm too late, I think the timing is still really, really good. And in fact, 80% of my liquid assets are in Bitcoin. And so I think the timing is still good. So every dollar you're putting into Bitcoin, I think it's going to be worth many, many multiples of that over the coming years. So I think it's a smart way to stack sats. It's kind of an automated way to stack sats every single month, and get your healthcare paid for at the same time. So it's two birds with one stone. And so that's our kind of entry point into getting Bitcoin involved. And I think the other part of this too that people don't really think about, although I know you talked about in your books, is that we've got a group of people in Crowd Health who are all really focused on taking care of themselves. Like I said, many of them are Bitcoiners. None of them are obese. None of them smoke. And so we've got a group of people who take care of themselves. So instead of you having to pay out, thousands of dollars a month, oftentimes to pay for people who aren't taking care of themselves, you're paying directly to other people who are taking care of themselves. And in fact, we actually give a discount to Crowd Health for people who have, low fasting insulin levels, who have low visceral fat levels. And so we're actually incentivizing our members to get healthy, and we're incentivizing people who are healthy to join Crowd Health, so we can build this community of people who don't have to subsidize kind of the fiat, health lifestyle. And as a result of that, we've got much, much lower bills than you would with your traditional healthcare plans. I mean, it's probably 50 or 60% less, in some cases 75 or 80% less than what you're currently paying with your healthcare. Plus, you're not paying for any of this other garbage that people are paying for. Like, most people don't really understand, but most health insurance plans in the United States pay for, gender reassignment and some of this other stuff that you're just kind of like, I don't want to be paying for that stuff. So you won't be paying for that stuff when you're a member of Crowd Health.
Yeah, and it's a huge thing, and I think it's illegal for insurance companies to test people's health and give them different rates based on their health,
It
right?
is. It
Yeah,
is.
which is ridiculous. And that's Murray Rothbard said this a long time ago, and he's been dead for 30 years now, 31 years, I think. And he said this is non-insurance. This is a form of subsidy from the healthy to the unhealthy. If insurance companies are not allowed to effectively discriminate based on your health status, then that's not insurance. It's the point of insurance is the idea that you're trying to protect people from risks, but there are different layers of risk. There are different levels of risk, and so if your house is in a hurricane, you should be paying a higher insurance premium than somebody, or if your house is in a hurricane zone, then you're likely going to be paying a higher insurance rate. But you can't do that with health, and so you take away from insurance companies the incentive to make their customers healthy. You take away from the customers the incentive to be healthy, and I think the really dangerous thing about it is that you see this quite often. A lot of people are just so amazed by the miracles of modern medicine. They keep hearing about all these incredible press releases. Harvard University announced that they are going to do this or that on one day or the other, a breakthrough that's going to fix cancer. And so for most people, because of all of the hype and propaganda surrounding modern medicine, for most people, they think, by the time I'm going to need modern medicine, particularly young people, by the time I'm going to get really sick, modern medicine is going to have figured it out. And I remember hearing several people you say this as a joke that, by the time that I get sick, if modern medicine hasn't figured out a cure for cancer, then maybe I I don't want to live anyway. But it's a horrible, horrible mentality, obviously, because I think the dangerous thing about it is just that this idea that medicine is just a magical cure for anything, that you can always just find a pill that will fix things. And it's very dangerous because people shouldn't be thinking of health in that way. I think the correct way of thinking of health is that it is something that is precious and you must preserve. And if you lose it, you may never get it back. You shouldn't think of it as being something that can be fixed with a pill. You should think of it as being something that can not be returned. And for me, this idea that, well, maybe science is going to find a cure for this or that disease, it's like saying that, well, I hope one day Apple is going to invent a laptop that you can throw from the 20th story window and that'll continue to work. And they could invent a laptop that would survive a 20-story fall, but it's much better that they just invent a laptop that can survive that fall and you just don't throw your laptop from 20 floors, because that's going to mean a lot better laptops. It makes a lot more sense. And similarly, the way to fix your health is not to wait for modern medicine to find a pill for whatever ails you. It's to sort out the cause of whatever it is that ails you and then stop that. But unfortunately, insurance is massively counterproductive to this. It just gives people the impression that you can get away with whatever you want.
Yeah, I mean, and I've kind of said it before, but it's healthcare is more welfare than it is healthcare. We're subsidizing all of the people who are taking that risk that some magic pill is going to happen. And I, like you said, would prefer to be in community with people who are taking this seriously now and not waiting for the magic pill, in 10 or 20 years. And so, we're already seeing that right now with GLP-1s. Now I can, eat whatever I want. And if I get overweight, then I have a pill to fix it. And so again, Crowdhealth is not paying for GLP-1s. We are
Nice.
not a high time preference type of organization. We're a low time preference organization. And we want groups of people who are low time preference. And so, if you want GLP-1s or the magic pill or whatever it may be, then we're not the right community for you. So, and like you said, every other type of insurance, you actually get risk adjusted based upon behavior or location or whatever. And in the United States, I don't know if it's the same way where you are, but we can actually plug something into our car and it can tell you like how good of a driver you are. And you actually get a rate based upon if you're a good driver versus a bad driver. And so, you can't do that with healthcare in kind of your traditional health insurance system. And it's a tragedy from my perspective, because it gives people very little incentive to actually improve their health. And so, we're trying to change that with Crowdhealth. Given we're not insurance, we can do that. And we think it's been, pretty effective. And in fact, we've had people who were overweight and tried to be members of Crowdhealth, and we said, "Hey, you're overweight," and they came back to us like 6 months later, and they had dropped the weight. He sent me a picture of him and his wife who are running a triathlon, and he's like, it was my motivation to get healthy due to wanting to be a member of Crowdhealth, that changed my life. And I'm like, thank God. Like that's what we want. We want people to be incentivized to change their health. And so far we're being pretty effective in doing that.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is the thing that people just miss. You have so much control over your health, and people just aren't aware of that. Part of it is because of the idea that insurance is there. Part of it is just the statist mentality that the government is mommy, government is daddy, government can take care of me. And, I pay my taxes, so it's their job to make sure that I get healthcare. It's their job to make sure that I don't get sick. And then I think the big part is just that people don't understand the connection between food and health. I think the vast majority of people think food is just entertainment, and it's something that you have to do because everybody does it. And all right, you need it because you need energy. Obviously, they get cranky when they're not getting their carbs. So they realize they need it, but they don't really understand that there is a connection, a very direct connection between it and your health. And for many of those people, it's not easy for them to ever even make an attempt to try and get on a diet that drastically changes their health. And they'll just always continue to try and have the same food all the time. And so they don't see the connection between their food and their health because it's just the same food. You'd need to really make a significant change in your diet in order to be able to notice significant changes in your health. But once you do, you'll be shocked. And I know this because I was one of those people, and I was shocked as soon as I started reducing the amount of processed carbs that I had initially. As soon as I stopped drinking soda and just eating the most egregious junk, just the low-hanging fruits of it, immediately I felt like a new human being, and it was incredible. I could run much faster. I lost a lot of excess fat. I felt a lot better. Everything just gets a lot better when you do that, and most people just are not aware of it. And with insurance, it doesn't give them the incentive to even think about it.
Yeah, and we think food is a big component of this because I think there's kind of two things that need to change to get our healthcare prices down. One is the price, just the price per procedure, but the other is consumption. And because we are an obese country, we have very high consumption of healthcare in general. And in fact, we're more obese, the United States, that we're 50% more obese than the other OECD countries. And so if you think about that, and folks who are obese are 5 to 10 times, consume 5 to 10 times the amount of healthcare as someone as normal weight. And so there's just, we actually sent out hundreds of copies of Fiat food to our members in hopes that they would pay attention and change their lifestyle habits for those who aren't eating meat dense types of diets and are gorging on carbohydrates. So we think, and we've actually heard feedback that, your and Matt's book on Fiat food has actually changed people's lifestyle habits. And so we do things like that within Crowdhealth too. We give people free books to be like, hey, go change your lifestyle because that's going to be a key component of reducing, healthcare costs. The other thing we do too is we have like quarterly specials. So the first quarter we had a DEXA scan. So you can go get a DEXA scan. It's fully fundable by the community so that you can understand what your muscle mass is. You can understand what your visceral fat is. And so people can start understanding how your body operates to improve their healthcare. We're doing gut health this month or this quarter. We're doing a VO2 max in the third quarter, and we're doing fasting insulin in Q4. So we're trying to get people to understand what are the main drivers of good health. How do you measure those things? Because if whatever you measure is going to be the things that improve that you're really paying attention to. So those are big kind of focus for us over the next year at Crowd.
Yeah, and I think fasting insulin is a huge one. It's so important, and it's remarkable how little attention is being paid to it. I mean, people spend so much time stressing over their cholesterol level, which arguably is largely noise. And we've done an episode on this podcast with Dr. Malcolm Kendrick. I urge you to look into it. If you have ever been concerned about your cholesterol, if you've had a doctor tell you about your cholesterol, listen to that episode with Dr. Malcolm Kendrick, and I think you'll see that there are a lot more important things to worry about, and the entire way in which the modern medical establishment thinks of cholesterol is completely ridiculous and counterproductive. But fasting insulin is a big one. Why do you think fasting insulin is important? Can you explain?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the best metric or the best proxy for metabolic health. In essence, if we can get our metabolic health in order, then all the chronic conditions, fall away. And so, fasting insulin is basically, how much insulin is your blood without you on a fasting, after a period of time of fasting. That just, in essence tells you, is your metabolic health operating correctly or incorrectly? As insulin goes up, inflammation goes up. As inflammation goes up, cardiovascular health declines precipitously. And from my perspective, and I'm not a doctor, but from the research that I've done, it's the insulin levels in your blood that are much more a driver of cardiovascular disease than it is LDL. I saw somebody the other day explain it pretty well, and he said, look, LDL is the firefighters and the inflammation are the fires. And just because you take away some of the firefighters doesn't mean you're going to have less fires. And so taking away the firefighters doesn't really help. LDL is trying to come in there to solve the inflammation issue. So let's solve the inflammation issue as opposed to trying to solve the firefighter issue. And so I've got a 250 LDL. I'm pretty darn high. I haven't worried about it. I get a coronary artery calcium score every year just to make sure there's no plaque buildup. I've been doing a carnivore or a semi-carnivore diet for the last 7 or 8 years. I've got 0 plaque in my arteries. I'm good to go, and I'm not really worried about it. I have filled one prescription my entire life, and it was because my first cardiologist said I needed to get on a statin because my LDL was so high. I can tell you that entire prescription was not used. It's still sitting in my desk. I don't even know why I still have it in my desk, but not one pill has been taken out of that because I've listened to folks like you and others who are just like, don't do this. This has actually, it penetrates the blood brain barrier for one, and your brain needs cholesterol to function properly. So you start taking cholesterol out of your brain cells, and your brain cells don't start operating correctly. That's why people who take statins, a lot of them say, I feel brain fog. I was like, yeah, you feel brain fog because the cells in your brain are comprised of cholesterol, and you need that to function properly. So I've not taken one of those pills. I keep it there to remind myself of, the medical industrial complex and the ways they're trying to manipulate us to maximize profits by feeding us, pills that our bodies don't actually need, that can be solved with a high red meat, from my perspective, a high red meat diet. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I get so fired up about this. And I'm like, people, listen, stop eating the carbohydrates and start eating more red meat, and you're gonna be fine. So anyways, I'll get off my high horse here, but it's something I'm fired up about, that I'm like, I wish people would listen to this, because it's so contrary to
you've
what you're
earned the
hearing
spot
in
on your
culture.
high horse. You don't have to get off. No, I agree.
Yeah,
I think the cholesterol thing is it's just absolutely amazing, because I think that's a great metaphor. It's really like the firefighters, and if you're fighting the firefighters, I mean, there is a way of looking at it. Yeah, whenever there are firefighters, there is fire, and so the more fire you have, the more firefighters you get. That doesn't mean that you can get rid of the fire by getting rid of the firefighters, and it's an essential compound that your body needs. And then the more you read about it, the more you see just how corrupt the science is, how wrong it is, how ridiculous it is. And it's not just an academic discussion. It's not just, oh, you're wrong about this. No, you're wrong about that. No, it's got really important real world implications, which is that if you continue to eat this way, if you continue to eat and take the drugs that they tell you, it's just going to be a continuous deterioration. I think the statins might be one of the, I think they were the most profitable drug in history. They made so much money from this. They've allocated it to everybody, because everybody's always eating carbs. So everybody's always inflamed. Everybody's always got high cholesterol. Well, not everybody, but when people get into their 50s, even their 40s, it's highly likely that if you do go and get your cholesterol tested, you're going to show up high. And then once you've taken that statin, and then it's just, you've entered the vortex of medical complications, more drugs, more procedures, more tests. And now you are a good customer. Now your doctor's happy with you because he's making a lot of money from you. Your insurance company's happy because they're making a lot of money from you. And you're sacrificing your health for the financial gain of others. Whereas on the other hand, if you just quit causing the fire in the first place, you put the firefighters out of business. You put the entire industry out of business. But although I should clarify, I think cholesterol, the statins were the most profitable drug in history before COVID, and the magic Pfizer juice came and broke all the records, I think. But
I think you're right. I think until the last 2 years, something has overtaken statins, but it's still, in the top 2 or 3.
Yeah. And now the crazy thing is that now it's no longer patented. The drugs for statins are now generic. So nobody's really making much money from it. But this is the ridiculous thing, that there's just so much institutional inertia behind it, and so many people who have been prescribing it for so long, that even though pharma doesn't really care anymore, the academic establishment and the medical doctors don't want to stop prescribing it and don't want to admit to being wrong, because it's pretty devastating to their credibility to say, yeah, sorry, we put you on this terrible drug for the past 40 years and it's made you become senile and it's destroyed your health and it's made us a lot of money. But anyways, let's move on.
One real quick thing on that, Safe, because I think it is recent. I believe Dave Feldman and Nick Norwitz and some others have recently come out with a study showing lean mass hyperresponders. And basically, these are people who are metabolically healthy. There were 100 of them. They were on a keto/carnivore diet. And then they tracked. So these are lean mass hyperresponders are basically people who are metabolically healthy, but have really, really high LDL. I think the LDL on average was like 260. So it was really, really high. And the reason that they are studying these people is because in all other ways they are healthy. They wanted just to focus on that LDL and what LDL does to your body when you have a high protein, high fat diet. And so they tracked 100 people, I think it was over 10 years, and they did coronary artery calcium score tests every year. So this is a test that shows the plaque that's built up in your coronary artery. And they saw zero impact to the plaque buildup in your heart over 10 years for these people with wickedly high LDL levels. And so it basically proved, or it's a big step in proving that LDL, if you are metabolically healthy, LDL has zero impact on the plaque buildup in your heart. And so I think it was, and this came out last week. I think it's really important because there's actually studies that are showing this now, that are very detailed and very, very clear in their conclusions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that they've also shown all kinds of ridiculous results when I think it was Nick Norwitz who did an experiment where he was eating a lot of Oreos and then
Yeah.
eating eggs and then showing the impact. And the eggs turned out to look to be worse for his cholesterol than the Oreos. I think that was the study that he did. Was that it? Do you remember?
No, he actually, I think his study, I think he ate Oreos, I think for like a week or 2 weeks straight. Like that's all he ate, which are super high in Oreos. Yeah, Oreos actually were worse for your LDL. Low cholesterol Oreos were worse for your LDL than his 2 weeks where he just ate eggs. That actually reduced his LDL cholesterol as opposed to increased your LDL cholesterol. So in essence, what he was saying is like, look, your body is very good at manipulating your LDL, so it's the right amount for your body, your lifestyle, what's going on with you. And so it was just kind of a funny study that actually showed that it was the opposite of what you thought. The low LDL, which told the Oreos, which totally screw up your metabolism, actually raised your LDL, whereas the high cholesterol eggs, which are great for your metabolism, actually lowered his LDL. And so it was, it was a super unscientific study. He just kind of did it as a kind of a shtick.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting the impact that it had on his LDL specifically.
Yeah, I think the more that I read about this, the more that I arrive at a pretty ignorant, perhaps, a conclusion, or just a conclusion wherein you realize, what, reading all of these papers is maybe a waste of time. You're better off just eating meat and not reading any scientific literature than spending all of your time trying to figure out the ideal diet by reading PubMed papers. And it sounds ridiculous, and I know a lot of people won't like this, but if you're reading PubMed and you're eating any kind of carbohydrates, you're eating any kind of sugar, you're really scamming yourself. I think I wonder just how much of all of this nutrition and medical science is positive for humanity. Because if you just told somebody to just eat meat, I think they would be eating a lot healthier than people who are spending all of their time going over all kinds of very, very, very sophisticated ways of approaching science and diet, and you should eat this and eat that and try this particular seed or that particular herb that is harvested in the Himalayas and this and this and that. You don't need any of this sophisticated garbage to be
Just
healthy.
eat a cow. You'll be fine.
Exactly.
They're
eat a
probably
cow.
raised in your backyard. Go talk to a rancher, get it directly from them, and eat a cow, and you'll be fine. The big thing in the United States right now with Trump is that he is pulling funding from these private universities like Harvard and those, and he's doing it because of some of the DEI policies that they have. And they said, look, you got to get rid of DEI, but Harvard got almost $1 billion of taxpayer money last year, and the vast majority of that was going to medical research. And if you look at Harvard and all the donations, I went into ChatGPT and I just said, tell me all the donations from pharma that Harvard has gotten over the last 5 years. And it was pages and pages of all these contributions by pharmaceutical companies to Harvard Medical School to do these trials and things like that. I was like, okay, so the United States government is giving money to a university that is also being funded by pharma to create nutritional studies that are clearly biased. And so from my perspective, it's like, hell yeah, take money away from Harvard Medical School, because most of their studies are absolute garbage that are biased based upon their ties to big pharma. So that's a big to do right now in the United States around the funding of these big private universities.
Oh yeah,
And by the way,
absolutely.
Harvard's got a $50 billion endowment. So why am I, as a taxpayer, paying Harvard $1 billion a year to go and do something where they got $50 billion that's racking in big time profits? Use that instead of my money.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the track record of Harvard in particular has got to be perhaps the worst of all the universities.
It's the worst.
It is, yeah. I mean, in Fiat Medicine, in Fiat Food, the book that Matthew wrote and I published at the Safe House, in that book, there's an extensive chapter on how Harvard, and also Nina Teicholz in her book, The Big Fat Surprise, she also discusses that in the I think it was 60s or 70s, the sugar industry paid enormous amounts of money to Harvard, and the Harvard nutrition department was basically a sugar advertisement. It was all about how sugar is good for you, sugar is a nice snack, sugar is a good way to control your hunger, sugar is not too bad, and Coca-Cola is fine. And I think his name was Frederick Stair, was the chairman of the nutrition department. He made tons of money. Died filthy rich from getting money from the food industry. So if you really look at their track record, I mean, they've been promoting all of these horrific diets because A, they're good for the industrial food producers, and B, and perhaps more importantly, they're good for the medical industry because the medical industry makes a lot of money from you getting sick. So it's really the pernicious thing about government funding to universities is not so much the money itself, perhaps, in as much as it is the legitimacy that they get from that government funding that then allows them to turn around and opine with a lot of authority about what it is that you should be eating, when in reality you really shouldn't be eating what they're saying. They're just doing what their sponsors want.
Yeah. Amen. So
yeah.
I love that book too. So yeah, we definitely recommend our members going out and getting it, because it gets to the heart of some of these perverse incentives that we have within healthcare. I mean, as you said, does the medical industrial complex make more money or less money if you're sick? Clearly, it makes more money. And so, maybe the most perverse incentive of all is that the people you go to for care actually make more money when you're sick. I mean, that's a tragedy from my perspective. And as I just mentioned, health insurance over the intermediate term actually makes more money if you are sick. United Healthcare, I think it was last year or the year before, I think had 3 times more diabetics in their population than in the general population. And so what is going on there? Well, they go in and they, find people that kind of have diabetes and they upcode them to having full-blown diabetes because they make more money they get paid more by the government if you have diabetes. It is a completely perverse system that, we're trying to upend.
This podcast is also brought to you by the Bitcoin Way, your professional Bitcoin IT team offering you personalized, secure, and comprehensive solutions for every step along your Bitcoin journey. The Bitcoin Way offer live concierge service to guide you with your Bitcoin cold storage, running your node, privacy best practices, inheritance planning, corporate strategy, and multi-sig solutions. They don't touch your coins, they guide you through the process of acquiring your coins and securing them. If you'd like to make your setup safer and more reliable, book a consult with them and see what they have to suggest. If you want to give someone the gift of Bitcoin, get them this professional service that will ensure they start off knowing exactly how to manage their coins and not lose them. Go to thebitcoinway.com and start Bitcoining more confidently. And speaking of Matthew's book, Fiat Medicine, Fiat Food, this may be the first time that we publicly talk about this, but we're going to be publishing at the Safe House. We're going to be publishing another book by Matthew and by you, Andy, and also with a chapter by my brother, Ammous, who's also been on the podcast. And that book's going to be called Fiat Medicine. And it's going to be applying the same framework of Fiat Food and the Fiat Standard to try and understand how medicine has been dysfunctional. Dr. Mary Bowden is going to be writing the foreword for that book. I'm really looking forward to it. I haven't read the manuscript yet, but Matthew's been updating me about it. So, can you tell us a little bit of a sneak preview into what this book is about?
Yeah, I mean, like Matthew did with Fiat Food, he takes us from the beginning and walks us through how did we get to this place of our medical industrial complex profiteering off of our sickness. You know how it's the sick care industry as opposed to the healthcare industry. So he walks us through till present day. I get a little bit of time to talk about where we're at in present day and what it could look like going forward. What if we decentralized all of medicine as opposed to having these centralized profiteering middlemen in the middle of it? So what does that look like? And then your brother takes some time to talk about it from a doctor's perspective, since he is a doctor and what he is seeing in the medical industrial complex and what the medical industrial complex actually does to our health and to the patients in this country. And so I think it'll be a really interesting kind of comprehensive look at where we were, where we're at, and where we should be headed. And so this is not just complaining about the medical industrial complex. We actually throw out real solutions, we think, to the problem that are scalable, that can be used by everybody in the United States. And so I think it's going to be, I don't think there's anything else out there like it. There's a lot of books, complaining about all the issues. There's very few books out there that actually talk about the solutions. And so we're excited to get that published, here in the next few months. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, I think this is a very powerful point, and it's true with the Bitcoin standard, the Fiat standard, and with Fiat food. And I think it'll be the same with Fiat medicine as books, which is that there are a lot of books out there talking about the problems in economics or in medicine or in food, and that a lot of people who do a really good job of identifying the symptoms of the problem. But I really think you can't really grasp the cause of the problem if you don't understand the problem of money. I think money is just such a pervasive thing. It's one half of every transaction. It pervades every aspect of our lives. It pervades your decisions about your future. It pervades how you purchase things. It's everywhere. And the fact that the government has a magic printer that allows it to print more of that money.
Yeah, amen.
Is an enormous factor. And once you start, the thing is, I mean, it's my sort of secret sauce to my success as a writer is precisely that I've just identified this massive open field of inquiry where academics don't go, because academics are not encouraged, or I should say they are actively discouraged from being too critical of inflation, on being too critical of money printing. Ultimately, academics at universities get paid from the money printer. As we were saying, the universities get a lot of funding from the government. Your ability to make it as an academic is not entirely, but to a very large extent dependent on your ability to toe the line of the people who control the money printer. And so the best way to get on their bad side is to find ways for not printing money. And so people who are writing about health, medicine, economics, whatever it is, as long as they stay away from mentioning the money printing, they can get their career ahead. So you can go along and talk about the evils of the insurance companies, the evils of the big food industry, the evils of this and that. It's all fine. But once you start talking about the evils of the money printing, then it's not easy to make your career, whether it's in economics or in anything else. And so once you have Bitcoin, like I do, and you decide to leave the academic field, well, then there's just an enormous open field of questions to be asked. And all you got to do is just think, all right, well, somebody's got a money printer and everybody else is having their money devalued. How do those things affect whatever question I'm looking at? And it could be anything. Anything is going to be affected by this enormous dynamic. The people are constantly losing purchasing power, and that purchasing power is going to a government that can hand out that money without facing a market test. So then apply that to anything. Apply that to the food industry, apply that to health, and you start seeing incredible explanatory power that allows you to really make sense of how the world works a lot better. And I think this is really this is the secret sauce to what I'm doing with the Safe House. Is just trying to publish more and more books that start from this premise, and I think it's a very powerful thing. So I'm really looking forward to reading this book.
Yeah, I mean, what you guys are doing at Safe House is for sure a societal good, because so many people are just oblivious to the impact that the money printer has on everything they do. Not just the value of your dollar, it's the value of your healthcare too. And so it's pervasive in almost everything that we do in our life is dictated by the money printer in Washington, D.C., which is just, the epitome of centralization. I mean, they have power over so many things that we do in our life. And if we can alleviate ourselves from that, if we can get off the fiat standard and into Bitcoin, I think that would just be a tremendous value to humanity. And so, while I want to fix healthcare, I also think that that's a really interesting way of helping to fix our monetary system too, by taking healthcare off the fiat standard and putting it on the Bitcoin standard. And so that's ultimately my vision. And maybe I'm taking on too much, at once, but I feel like, man, if you can get the monetary system figured out and the healthcare system figured out, like that's a pretty big, big, hairy, audacious goal. And that's what we're firing on.
Yeah, and I mean, let's face it: if you're eating meat and stacking sats, you have figured it out. It's not a university or a school exam where you need to write the perfect essay, and you don't need to. Life's real test is in the actual way in which you live your life. So the correct answer is to stack sats and eat meat. If you figured that out, you pass.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because our largest contingent of people within Crowdhealth are our Bitcoiners. The second largest are carnivores, and there's overlap there clearly. But we have a huge group of carnivores in the community, and then we have a huge group of people who just don't want to participate in Western medicine. So they're looking for holistic and naturopathic and integrative docs. We have a bunch of people who are going to Chinese medicine docs, all kinds of docs that are kind of outside of the medical industrial complex, because they don't want the way our system is currently set up. Again, I think this is driven by the money printer, is that doctors only have something like 8 minutes to talk to you when you go into the primary care doc, because their reimbursement rates have gone down significantly. The value of that, not only is their literal rate gone down, but it's gotten inflated, right? The dollar has gotten inflated. And so the money they're getting paid is actually less than the actual discount that they got from last year. My rate's gone down 5%, but in reality, my rate has really gone down probably 10 to 15%. And so they just don't have enough time to spend with you to talk about core issues. And so what happens? They have to give you a drug. Like, they have to alleviate your symptoms as opposed to getting to the root cause of what's going on in your life. And so again, the money printer is dictating so much of our life, even down to our primary care doc visit, where they only have 8 minutes now because they can't afford to spend more time with you than that. And that impacts our healthcare, because I can't tell him about what I'm eating, how much I'm working out, how I'm sleeping, those types of things. They just don't have time. They have to give you a drug to alleviate the symptom, and it makes you happy, but it's a short term, again, high time preference fix, as opposed to go root cause, low time preference, so that you don't have these recurring health issues over the next decade. That's the tragedy of our system that is rooted in money printing.
Yeah, and of course, another part of this is that they're constantly, they have to give you the standard of care. They have to tell you what they are told by their medical licensing bodies, by their medical school. There's a standard of care, and if you don't stick to that, and anything bad happens to the patient, even though it might not be because of what you did, you are liable to being sued, and that could destroy your life. So the whole centralization of it leads to every doctor essentially being a prescription bot. I think that's really, I read this somewhere on Twitter, and I think it's the best way of describing doctors. And I think, and this was a term that was more apt before Chat GPT and the AI revolution, because now bots are a lot more advanced. But this was, I think, modern medicine produces doctors that are bots by 2010 technology standard, wherein you give them 3-4 symptoms and they run them through their training, and this symptom means then we narrow it down to one of those four things. You add another symptom, then we narrow it down to two. Then you add another symptom, then we narrow it down to this, and therefore we give you that drug. And it's such a shame because these are some of the smartest, hardest working, most focused and dedicated people. You don't make it out of medical school unless you're seriously intelligent and seriously capable of spending a lot of time working on something. It takes a lot of discipline and focus to be able to get to medical school. And yet everything that they do is just follow very simple decision tree. If it's all right, his back hurts, so therefore it's got to be one of those things. So you ask this question, and then based on the answer, you go do this. And it's just a very simple decision tree that any 15-year-old could do if you just give them the decision tree. But they have to go through 8 years of medical school, undergraduate and then medical school and then training, get into mountains of debt, and then become completely beholden to the system because they're so invested in it. They've gotten into so much debt and they need this system in order to pay them off. And that's why they end up with this situation where you don't have this personal relationship between a doctor and a patient. And the doctor is not allowed almost to think. The doctor is not able to look at their patients and think about what they're doing. I've heard this from so many people. They'll go to their doctor and they'll get a checkup, and the doctor will look at the results and says, wow, that's great. Your cholesterol is looking a lot better. Your this and that, it's all looking so much better. So clearly you've been doing well. What have you been doing different? And the patient will say, well, actually, I've started eating low carb, or I've started eating carnivore. I've started eating keto. And the doctor says, wow, that's weird. You got to be careful. It's bad for your kidneys, or it's bad for your lymph nodes, or it's bad for this or this or that, or it causes colon cancer. And then zero curiosity to think, why is it that this guy doing the exact opposite of what I told him to do is achieving the results that what I told him to do would never have achieved? And so doctors will be like, no, this is insane. You can't, you're a 55-year-old and you used to be overweight and you had all of these things. And now you've got the blood work of a 40-year-old. That makes no sense. You'd think they'd be curious to try and look into this more, but they can't afford to be. They can't just go and tell the next patient to do what the first patient did. They don't have this ability of learning. And that's the only thing that makes a doctor. I don't care how much time you spend in medical school. I don't care how much you read. I don't care how many textbooks you swallow. It doesn't matter. You need to be interacting with human beings, and you need to be building your understanding from your real interaction based on your experience. You told this guy to do this and he got better. You told this guy to do that, he got worse. So from now on, I'm going to be recommending this thing. If you don't have that mental process, then you're essentially useless. You're just a very simple decision tree.
Yeah, you start to be a doer instead of a thinker. And we have some of the greatest thinkers in the world, your brother included, who are doctors. They were like, we need to give them the autonomy to actually think and use their brains as opposed to this decision tree. And unfortunately, the decision tree is created by organizations, these accreditation organizations, who are typically bought out by pharmaceutical and big food to make the decision tree, more profitable for them. I saw something the other day where the American Diabetes Association was putting recipes on their website, and these recipes for people with diabetes had something like 60 or 70 grams of carbohydrates in them. And I'm sitting here being like, what the hell are we doing feeding these people with diabetes, 60 or 70 grams of carbohydrates with each meal? I mean, it's ridiculous. And the only thing it's going to do is ensure that they stay on insulin, ensure that the big insulin producers continue to make money. Shockingly, a lot of these pharmaceutical companies are funding these organizations. So they are the ones, in essence, creating the standard of care to ensure that their product continues to be used. So, and they got a lot more money than anybody else does. Unfortunately, the American Cattlemen's Association doesn't have a whole lot of money to lobby, these big organizations or even Congress to change what's going on here. And so the one with the money wins. Again, total direct, impact from the money printer. And so we are just, it's perverse throughout our system. So, we try to get people to independent docs. Independent docs are willing to go against the standard of care more than the big health system docs. Unfortunately, the insurance companies are buying the doctors. So the largest owner of doctors right now in the United States is United Healthcare. There are 1 million doctors in the United States. United Healthcare owns 100,000 of them. So 10% of them are owned by one company. And so with continued consolidation, lots of liquidity, historically very low interest rates, these have all got consolidated. And so, the centralization continues. So my other people who are listening, at least in the United States, I don't know how this applies overseas, but like go find independent doctors as opposed to doctors associated with big hospital systems. They are much more likely to have your worldview than the worldview of kind of the cultural norm. So highly recommend finding an independent doctor in your location, in your area, especially cardiology, especially some of these specialists. They are a little bit more free thinking than your big hospital system doctors, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is being able to just develop a personal relationship with the doctor and being able to see that they are an intelligent person who thinks is, I think, really important. And you might think that they're not out there, but they are. There are many of those people. And the beautiful thing is that you can find these people online now. You don't have to see them. With a video camera, they can, with the video call, they can get quite a bit of what a doctor could get if they were seeing you in person. They can commission the studies, the tests that you need, and get the results. So you can get quite a bit from telemedicine, just talking to intelligent doctors. I think I highly recommend that. And I'm going to go ahead and shill my brother as well, Ahmed Ammous. He's doing this. And so, yeah, if you're looking for a doctor who's not into the Fiat world, check out my brother, Ahmed Ammous. He does teleconsulting, which I think is really good because, I mean, he can help a lot of people who are just lost, who have no idea about any of the things that we take for granted and can't really take them seriously unless they come from a doctor who knows what he's talking about, who can go through all of the things that your Fiat doctor says and explain to you why your Fiat doctor is wrong, explain to you the incentives for him to be wrong, explain to you why the way in which he's wrong is hurting you. So I very much recommend that. And yeah, so when you combine that, take care of your own health, find a doctor that you can actually talk to that understands how things are going, and then get out of the insurance scam. I mean, that's just such an enormous improvement in your health and in your finances as well. It's going to really make a difference, I think.
Amen. Like I said, we're like 50% less. If you exit the system, we're about 50% less. We had a guy the other day who was paying $3,000 a month for him and his wife and his two kids, and with Crowdhealth, it was something like $640 a month. So they saved, what is that, 80% or something like that by switching over. And so it reestablishes the doctor-patient relationship. You're not subject to any of these perverse incentives. It's just a much better way of doing things. So, we love for any Bitcoiners out there, especially, to come in and join us. You'd be an awesome add to the crowd.
Yeah, and one interesting data point I saw you mention is that something like 550,000 Americans declare medical bankruptcy each year, which is just astounding. 500,000 people. Yeah. And 80% of them have health insurance.
That's right. I mean, we've got hundreds of thousands of families going bankrupt every year due to a medical event, even though they have health insurance. So the whole point of health insurance, or insurance in general, is to not put you in financial distress in the case of something big happening. And so we have hundreds of thousands of families going bankrupt when something big happens, even though they have health insurance. And so the question is why? Why does that happen? One is they have huge deductibles. So you go on these, Affordable Care Act, Obamacare plans, and these deductibles are something like, $10, $12, $14,000. I looked just because I was curious for my family what my rate would be, and I think it was $1,300 or $1,400 a year or a month, and then it was $14,000 or $16,000 depending upon what plan I chose for a deductible, which means that I got to pay the first $14,000 before the health insurance plan pays a dime. And so if you include the premiums every month, I'm paying the first $30,000 before our health insurance, pays a dime. That just doesn't make sense for me and my family. And for most of the people watching this, it doesn't make sense for you either. And so if you don't have $14,000 on hand and you have a big health event, then you're toast. And you have to go into bankruptcy. I mean, that's your only other option, unfortunately. So that's the first reason. The second reason is, and I didn't really understand this before I had my little debacle with my health insurance plan, is 20% of bills are denied, 1 in 5. So you got a 1 in 5 chance of you have something big happening, and the health insurance plan denies it. So they think it's a guarantee that you're going to get paid when you have a claim, but that's just not the case, as we have seen. We've seen, unfortunately, this Luigi Mangione thing, killing the CEO of United Healthcare back in December was a reflection of this, where he had, huge bills, and United was either denying them or they were delaying them, which means when you submit a bill, they'll say, I need more information before I'll approve it. I need more information. I need more information. And they can string this thing out over a long period of time, and you have no recourse. Like, your health is in the hands of these health insurance companies. And if they don't take care of you, then bankruptcy is unfortunately the only answer for a lot of these families. So, we have 10,000 members. We've served almost 15,000 members over the last 4 years. And we've had 0 bankruptcies within our community over a healthcare expense. And so we're pretty happy with that outcome. And we've built our system so that anybody can afford this. If you have a big health event, we ask you to pay the first $500. So if it's a cancer case and you have 50 doctor visits and 20 imaging and a prescription and surgeries and all these things, that's one health event. So you got to pay the first $500 of that. The rest of it is submitted to the community. From our perspective, anybody can come up with $500. Like, anybody in this, country can come up with $500 to figure out how to pay for that. And that keeps people from going into financial distress if something really, really big happens to them. So, it's a tragedy that people are going bankrupt due to a medical expense, and we're solving that.
Yeah. And apparently there's been a huge lawsuit against United Healthcare because they used AI to deny 90% of people the claims, which 90% of them should have been paid as part of the policies of their company. But they used some ChatGPT thing, and then whoops, they took away your money, and now you're bankrupt.
Yeah. And it's actually even worse. What some of these health insurance plans do is, as I mentioned earlier, if you have $1,000 of premiums and so that allocates kind of $850 to your medical care and $150 for their profit and administrative costs. If that $850 starts creeping up into $860 or $870 or $880, which means the medical expenses are higher than what they think, what they'll do is they'll dial up the difficulty of getting these bills authorized. So there's literally a dial where they're like, make it harder or make it easier, depending upon how it's going. And so if you think about it, a lot of times the insurance company has to pre-authorize your procedure. So if you want to go to get a knee replacement, it's a big procedure. The doctor has to fill out all this paperwork, has to submit it to the health plan. The health plan has to approve it before you can actually go and get your knee replaced or whatever the big surgery is. And if they dial up the difficulty to do that, that means they're going to have less knee surgeries, which means that more money is flowing to the bottom line. And, again, it's just this ridiculous amount of perverse incentives within the system where they're actively working against you. And it's like you get double screwed. In year, they'll actually work against you to get your claims approved because they want to maximize their 15% that they have to allocate towards profit. Over the long term, they actually want to see your expenses go up because they can actually charge you more for that, and they can make that 15% as a dollar amount bigger. And so you're screwed in the short term and you're screwed in the long term. And so all the incentives are stacked up against you. I think it's interesting when people have a big healthcare expense, what do? They say, well, now I have to go fight with my health insurance company to get these bills paid. What we want to do is like, hey, I'm going to fight with, as a partner against the medical industrial complex with Crowdhealth and the member to get your bills paid. Like, we're an ally with you as opposed to your enemy and the way the current system is set up. And so I think that's a huge differentiator between, how we operate and how health insurance. We have zero incentive to get a bill denied. We have all the incentive in the world. I mean, think about it. If one of our Bitcoin members got their bill denied, what would they do? They would go on Twitter or X and they would say, Crowdhealth denied my bill. That'd be a marketing disaster, right? There's no incentive for us to do that. We're going to fight with you to get the bills paid as opposed to against you. So once you get to, you preach this all day long. Incentives are everything. So we have every incentive in the world to help you get your bills paid. And that's why I think, on Trustpilot, we're 4.8. And I think the other health insurance plans are somewhere between 1 and 1.3 out of 5. So that's, I think, a big differentiator for us.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's fantastic, man. Wonderful to hear. All right. Anything else you want to tell us about what's coming up for Crowd Health?
Man, we've got a catastrophic plan that we're going to be launching here in the next couple of weeks. So instead of that $500 initial commitment, we ask you to pay the first $15,000. And this is basically for people who are like, look, I just want help with the big stuff. I can take care of all the little stuff. Don't worry about the little stuff. I want to just need some help with the big stuff. And so we're calling that Crowd Health Black Swan for those Black Swan events that happen in life. And so for people who have some Bitcoin stacked or some money in the bank and want a significantly lower price for Crowd Health, then we're going to be offering that in the next couple of weeks, which we're excited about. And then keep a lookout for some really cool stuff over the next quarter, which we'll talk about more. Follow us on X at joincrowdhealth.com. You'll always have the latest and greatest with what's going on with us.
Fantastic. Andy, thank you so much for joining us, and really best of luck. Keep growing and keep kicking the insurance companies' asses.
Thanks, man. Hey, anybody who wants to sign up, joincrowdhealth.com, use code SAFE, and you get $99 for the first 3 months. It's $99 if you want to try it out to see how it works. We think you'll like it. That's great. If you don't, you can go elsewhere. So we don't have any open enrollments or any, shenanigans like that. You can start whenever you want. You can end whenever you want. So make sure you use the code SAFE for that discount for the first 3 months.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Andy.
Thanks, brother.
Cheers.